He wasn't born in a palace. He didn't inherit power. Yet in 1804, Napoleon Bonaparte took a golden crown from the Pope's hands and placed it on his own head. In that moment, he rewrote history. But who was this man, and how did an outsider become Emperor of Europe? Born in 1769 on Corsica, a rugged island freshly conquered by France, Napoleon grew up resenting his new rulers. He wasn't fully French, nor truly Corsican. That identity crisis fueled a fire. He dreamed of greatness while others saw only a poor boy with a thick accent and sharp mind. His father, Carlo, tried to play politics, first resisting the French, then embracing them. But debts piled up. The Bonapartes weren't rich, just clever. Napoleon's mother, Letizia, ruled the home with steel discipline. From her, he learned to endure, to fight, and never to beg. At age 9, Napoleon left Corsica for France. He barely spoke the language. In military school, other boys mocked his accent, his small size, his poverty. But Napoleon didn't cry. He read. He studied war. He remembered every insult and vowed to crush those who looked down on him. When the French Revolution exploded in 1789, everything changed. Kings fell, nobles fled, chaos ruled. Napoleon, now a young officer, saw opportunity. In a France tearing itself apart, merit finally mattered more than birth. And no one was hungrier for power than Bonaparte. In 1793, Royalists took control of Toulon, a key French naval base. Napoleon, then just 24, wasn't in charge, but he had a plan. He proposed targeting a crucial fort to force a retreat. When they listened, it worked. Overnight, he wasn't just an officer, he was a hero. His victory at Toulon earned him the rank of Brigadier General. That title, though grand, masked deeper ambition. He didn't just want a military role. He wanted influence, reputation, control. Napoleon began navigating Parisian politics with the same strategy he used in battle. Strike fast, strike smart. 1795. Royalists rise again in Paris. The government is desperate. They call Napoleon. He responds, not with speeches, but with cannons. One brutal volley crushes the mob. No hesitation, no mercy. The phrase that follows, a whiff of grape shot. And with it, Napoleon becomes a household name. After the uprising, the 26-year-old general gained not only power, but romance. He met Josephine de Beauharnais, a widow of charm and influence. She had connections. He had ambition. Their marriage wasn't just passion, it was strategy, and it would shape his path to the throne. In 1796, Napoleon was given command of the struggling army of Italy. His orders were simple: distract Austria. What he did instead was legendary. He turned a ragged, hungry force into a whirlwind of victories. This was no sideshow. This was the birth of a military icon. Napoleon fought differently. He didn't wait, he moved. Fast, bold, unpredictable. Against overwhelming Austrian forces, he split their alliances, struck their supply lines, and shattered their morale. City after city fell. France, once mocked in Italy, now marched in as victors behind their unstoppable young commander. But Napoleon didn't just fight with guns, he fought with words. He published victories like theater reviews. His soldiers weren't just an army, they were a cause. Glory for France, glory for him. Every triumph was carefully spun, and Paris was watching, falling under his spell. By 1797, Austria begged for peace. Napoleon didn't just negotiate, he dictated terms. He handed Venice to Austria in exchange for more strategic land. This was no longer a general's job. He was acting like a head of state, Diplomacy, warfare, and power, he was mastering them all. When he returned to Paris, crowds cheered like he was already king, but he didn't flaunt it. He dressed simply, let others praise him. In private, he calculated. Publicly, he stayed quiet. He knew those who rush for power often fall. Better to wait and strike when the moment is right. In 1798, Napoleon set sail for Egypt, not just to fight the British, but to make history, like Caesar, like Alexander. The campaign began with fire and victory, but soon sandstorms, disease, and rebellion followed. Egypt wouldn't be his empire, but it would become part of his legend. Defeat was closing in, but Napoleon didn't stay. In secret, he left his army in Egypt and sailed back to France. No orders, no permission, just instinct. By the time his enemies learned of it, he was already in Paris, ready to seize power. France was in ruins. A new war was brewing. The government, called the Directory, was crumbling. People were exhausted by poverty, by revolution, by endless bloodshed. They didn't want another hero. They wanted order. Napoleon saw his moment and prepared to strike. November 1799, soldiers stormed the legislative chambers. Napoleon declared the old government finished. Politicians protested. Chaos erupted. But with cannons parked outside and generals at his back, resistance melted. In a single day, he replaced a republic with himself. He didn't call himself king, not yet. He was now first consul, a title borrowed from ancient Rome, but make no mistake, he was in charge. A new constitution gave him total power, and the people, they voted for it. In fact, they begged for it. Under Napoleon, the chaos stopped. He built roads. He paid soldiers. He reformed the courts. People didn't love him because of freedom. They loved him because life finally worked again. After a decade of screaming and blood, France could breathe. Napoleon didn't just conquer land. He organized it. He created the Napoleonic Code, a legal system that ended feudal chaos. For the first time, laws were written, unified, and applied equally. Across France, even peasants knew this wasn't the old world anymore. Religion had been torn apart by the revolution. Churches closed, priests hunted, but Napoleon brokered peace. In 1801, he signed a concordat with the Pope. The church returned under state control. Believers got their faith. Napoleon got their loyalty. In 1800, Austria attacked again. Napoleon marched over the Alps like Hannibal. The surprise was perfect. At Marengo, the battle nearly collapsed. But at the final moment, reinforcements arrived. Victory! France cheered. Napoleon wasn't just lucky, he made sure luck found him. After Marengo, the people demanded more. In 1802, Napoleon became consul for life. A vote passed with 99% approval, or so the results said. But what mattered wasn't the numbers, it was clear. France didn't want democracy, it wanted Napoleon. By 1804, no title could contain him. Emperor was the next chapter, but Napoleon didn't wait for the Pope. In front of the world, he placed the crown on his own head. Not divine right, not inherited blood, just pure will. With the crown on his head, Napoleon redrew the map of Europe. Kingdoms vanished. New client states appeared. Brothers and generals became kings. It wasn't just war, it was architecture. Napoleon wasn't just building an empire, he was designing a world that bore his name. France crushed Austria, then Prussia, then Russia, again and again. In just a few years, Napoleon became master of the continent. No general alive could match his speed, tactics, or ruthlessness. His victories were terrifying, his empire enormous. To defeat Britain, Napoleon launched an economic war. He closed Europe's ports to British trade. But merchants suffered, smugglers thrived, allies resented the cost. It was a bold plan, but in strangling Britain, Napoleon began strangling his own empire. In Spain, Napoleon tried the same trick, replace the king with his brother, but the Spanish people rose up. What followed was guerrilla war, brutal occupation, and endless bloodshed. It wasn't a quick campaign, it was a wound that never closed. Victories had made Napoleon seem invincible, but the empire was too large, too many enemies, too much pride. Even allies began to fear him. Europe wasn't conquered, it was waiting for a moment, waiting for Napoleon to make a mistake. In 1812, Napoleon launched his boldest invasion yet, Russia. With over 600,000 men, it was the largest army Europe had ever seen. He believed in speed and surprise. But Russia offered only silence, retreat, and fire. Napoleon reached Moscow only to find it empty. Then it burned. The Russians torched their own city. No supplies, no shelter, no surrender. Napoleon waited for peace. It never came. Winter did. Then came the cold. Men froze. Horses died. Guns were abandoned. Cossacks struck like ghosts. The Grand Army became a ghost itself. Of 600,000 men who entered Russia, only a fraction returned. It was no longer a retreat. It was a graveyard. Europe smelled blood. Prussia, Austria, Britain, Russia, they all rose. One by one, Napoleon's puppet states collapsed. He fought and he won sometimes, but the tide had turned. His enemies had learned his tricks, and France, exhausted, no longer followed with blind faith. In 1814, Paris fell. Napoleon was forced to abdicate. No parade, no farewell, just a signed document, an exile to a tiny island called Elba. From emperor to prisoner in just 10 years. But even then, his story wasn't finished. Just 10 months after exile, Napoleon escaped Elba. No army, just belief. As he marched toward Paris, troops sent to arrest him knelt instead and cried, "Vive l'Empereur!" The people didn't forget. The 100 days had begun. The king fled. Paris erupted in cheers. Napoleon was emperor again, but the world had changed. Old allies closed ranks. No second chances. No diplomacy. This time they were coming to finish him. June 18th, 1815, Waterloo. Napoleon faced British and Prussian forces on muddy Belgian soil. He fought brilliantly, but misjudged timing, delayed reinforcements, rain, a deadly mistake. And at dusk, France broke. The eagle had fallen. Captured again, Napoleon wasn't sent to Elba. This time they chose St. Helena, a rock in the middle of the Atlantic. No escape, no throne. Just wind, memory, and death waiting. His world had once been Europe. Now it was 12 square miles. Napoleon died in 1821, alone. But he never truly left. His code, his ambition, his myth, they endure. In every courtroom shaped by civil law, in every leader who dares to rise alone. For better or worse, the world still speaks Napoleon's name. Was Napoleon a tyrant or a reformer? For some, he was the man who crushed republics. For others, the architect of modern law. But behind the medals and myths was a man. Brilliant, restless, obsessed with control, and haunted by the fear of being forgotten. He divorced her for an heir, but in exile he read her letters, whispered her name. When Josephine died in 1814, he said, "She was the only woman I ever truly loved." Even emperors are haunted by the people they leave behind. Napoleon had a son, Napoleon II, the King of Rome, but the boy would never rule. After Waterloo, he was taken to Vienna, raised as a pawn. He died at 21, coughing blood. The empire ended not with war, but with silence. After his death, enemies feared his memory more than his armies. Britain hid him on St. Helena. France buried him in exile, but the people remembered. Songs, books, statues, he became more than a man, he became a legend. Look around. Napoleonic law still governs millions. His battlefield tactics are still taught, his ambition studied and feared. Napoleon Bonaparte reshaped the world not just with swords, but with systems. He didn't just chase glory. He built something that endured. On May 5th, 1821, Napoleon died. Stomach cancer, some say. Poison, others whisper. Outside, the Atlantic wind howled. Inside, his final words were whispered. France, the army, Josephine. A man of war undone by time, a king with no crown left to hold. 2 decades later, Napoleon's body returned to France. Crowds wept. Soldiers lined the streets. Cannons thundered. The emperor had come home, not as a prisoner, but as a symbol. Death could not erase the echo of his name. Today he lies under a golden dome at Les Invalides. Tourists visit. Veterans salute. Some curse, others admire, but all pause. Because in that tomb rests a man who rose from nothing and bent history to his will. He ruled like Caesar, dreamed like Alexander, wrote laws, led armies, and crowned himself emperor. But what remains isn't just statues or battles. It's the idea that one man, armed with nothing but will, can change the world. This is not just Napoleon's story. It's a mirror of power, of ambition, of humanity's hunger to leave a mark. And as long as we ask how far a person can rise or fall, his name will never disappear.